Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Friday, the 23rd of February. Today is the 140th day since October 7th. Friends, the encouraging news is that our efforts are making a difference. The United States is shifting its policies and its tone, and it's even beginning to take small actions. We've talked about sanctions against settlers, and for the first time this past week, the U.S. used the word ceasefire in its proposed UN Security Council resolution. This might seem like very, very small steps, but just today, the Biden administration declared that Israeli West Bank settlements are inconsistent with international law. This is reversing what became known as the Pompeo Doctrine under the Trump administration, when Trump's Secretary of State in 2020 said that settlements were not per se inconsistent with international law. So this is a big deal for the Biden administration to be returning to what was historic, longstanding U.S. policies. And according to the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, he said this decision is a return to longstanding U.S. policies under Republican and Democratic administrations alike. And our position at Churches for Middle East Peace is that this is a return to historic U.S. policy, to say that settlements are inconsistent with international law, but we have to demand that a return to historic policy is not good enough, and to encourage lasting solutions that first and foremost will bring an end to the current violence, that Hamas would lay down their arms, that Israel would stop its bombing and its campaign on Gaza, that the immediate death and killing would be brought to an end, but also that the core causes of the conflict would be addressed, including the decades-long occupation of the Palestinian people. So this policy change with the Biden administration, where restoration came as Israel just announced it's planning to build thousands of housing units in the West Bank, a decision that was framed in response to yesterday's attack at Ma'ale Adumim that I talked about in my update yesterday. Blinken expressed disappointment with Israel's announcement of new settlement construction, noting that the U.S. had long described new settlements as counterproductive to reaching an enduring peace. The UK ambassador to Israel also called the plan deeply concerning. US President Joe Biden said that the Palestinian people are suffering as a result of Hamas's terrorism, and that Hamas does not represent the overwhelming majority of Palestinians. Big news in Israel is that today Netanyahu announced for the first time his post-war plan for Gaza. So this is 4.5 months after the start of what's being called by the world the Israel-Hamas war. Prime Minister Netanyahu belatedly unveiled this plan. It's called the Day After Plan for Gaza. The short-term goals are destroying Hamas and Islamic Jihad, their military and government capabilities, securing the release of the hostages. It's believed to be that there could be as many as 100 hostages still alive remaining in Gaza. Some of them might have already been removed out of Gaza. That was expressed in the news last week. But the goal short term would be to prevent Gaza from posing any threat to Israel. The medium term goal in Netanyahu's plan would be for Israel to have the freedom to operate militarily in Gaza. It would set up a buffer zone along the Egypt-Gaza border, and it would maintain security control over the West Bank. Civil affairs and public order would be governed by Gazan technocrats, not identified with states or organizations that support terror and must not receive salaries from them. So it's unclear specifically what that's referring to. Israel would work to ensure the permanent closure of UNRWA and the establishment of a new international body. According to Netanyahu's plan, rebuilding Gaza would only start after Gaza was completely demilitarized and de-radicalization had started. Israel would have to approve the funding and leadership of countries participating in the rehabilitation process. The Palestinian Authority said that the plan aims to perpetuate Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories and to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. Palestinian President Abbas said that Gaza will be a part of the independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Any other plan is doomed to fail. That's according to a spokesperson for President Abbas. In terms of ongoing efforts towards a ceasefire and hostage exchange, Israeli negotiators are in Paris for another summit of intelligence chiefs aimed at securing a new hostage release ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. We know that the Hamas delegation, led by the political leader Ismail Haniyeh, left Cairo on Thursday after being there for 3 days. So they left yesterday. According to Hamas, the delegation met with the head of Egyptian intelligence, Abbas Kamel, and discussed a possible deal. A leading member of Hamas said that he believes a new deal is possible and that Gaza could be led under another competent Palestinian government. In Gaza, the health ministry has said that 500,000 people in the northern Gaza Strip are suffering from severe hunger. According to the ministry, there are 350,000 patients with chronic conditions, 60,000 pregnant women, and 700,000 children suffering from malnutrition and dehydration within the Gaza Strip. The War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz said that the Israeli Defense Forces will be operating in Rafah and that fighting in Gaza will not end until the threat posed by Hamas is removed. And the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told his Israeli counterpart Gallant that Israel needs a credible plan to ensure the safety of and the support for the more than 1 million people who are still sheltering in Rafah before any military operations proceed there. According to the health ministry in Gaza, the death toll is at 29,514 Palestinians killed, 69,616 wounded since the war began on October 7th. Today in Israel, there were protests on Friday at the Kerem Shalom crossing to prevent the passage of aid trucks into Gaza. Police and border guards cleared the protesters, which allowed 79 trucks to enter into Gaza. The Israeli Defense Forces said 2 Islamic Jihad militants were killed overnight in a drone strike in Jenin, and at their funeral, Palestinians threatened to avenge their deaths, saying that they would attack the Israeli town of Afula. That's according to the Israeli Defense Forces and in Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper. The IDF said that fighter jets struck Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, and a suspicious drone intercepted in Israel's north near the Lebanese border. Rocket and aerial infiltration sirens sounded in northern Israel. The U.S. military said that it destroyed Houthi drones and anti-ship cruise missiles in Yemen and the Red Sea after identifying them as an imminent threat to U.S. Navy ships and commercial ships in the Red Sea. Yesterday, Secretary Blinken was in Brazil. He was at meetings related to the G20. I wanted to just share a few of the notes from the State Department readout from Brazil. The U.S. had vetoed Argentina's UN Security Council resolution at the UN. They presented an alternative resolution. Secretary Blinken was asked about the veto, and he said it's important to start first with this clear fact and proposition. The resolution would, this is Blinken's word, the resolution would not in and of itself have resulted in a ceasefire. The question before us is what is the most effective way to move forward? To move forward in a way that gets the hostages out, that gets an extended humanitarian ceasefire, and ultimately leads to the end of the conflict. And in our judgment, the best way to do that is exactly what we're doing right now, to work intensely on an agreement on the hostages. This is something I'm involved in virtually every single day, including here alongside my colleagues, CIA Director Bill Burns, the White House Middle East Director or Coordinator Brett McGurk. We're in constant communication and working on every aspect of this because it's the quickest path, the most effective path to get to where everyone wants to go, including everyone here at the G20. As I said, and he kind of goes on about the Security Council resolution. Then he says, now in terms of what people want to achieve, actually, we all share the same goals. Everyone wants to see this conflict end as soon as possible. Everyone wants to see the end of suffering of children, women, and men in Gaza, where so many innocents who've suffered and continue to suffer so terribly, who are caught in this crossfire of Hamas's making. We want to see this end as quickly as possible. And I think that we're united in wanting to see after Gaza, the path forward to a genuinely durable, sustainable peace, to make sure that this never happens again for Israelis and never happens again for Palestinians. We're united in that. So I wanted to share those words because with all due respect to our Secretary of State Blinken, I don't think that we share the same goals. He's assuming and making assumptions, in my opinion. He's saying that we all share the same goal, that this war would be brought to an end as quickly as possible. And, he makes the argument and he goes on to say that it's about tactics. And certainly there are disagreement about tactics. But when we hear the rhetoric coming out of the Israeli military and out of Netanyahu's regime and his the war cabinet, we're not hearing a desire for this war to be brought to an end. We're hearing a desire for revenge, a desire for the eradication not only of Hamas, but the infrastructure in Gaza. We're hearing dehumanization of Palestinians. And so with all due respect to Mr. Blinken, we don't share the same goals. And I think it's really important, and we've been talking to the State Department and other officials at the Biden administration about this, that the first task of a leader is to define reality. And if we're not looking at reality from a perspective that is accurate, then our solutions are not going to address adequately the current situation. So I think it's really important that the U.S. government and that all people involved really listen and seek to learn and seek to understand the situation more holistically. Certainly, the Israeli government does not have the same goals of bringing an immediate end to what's happening in Gaza. And we are not united in that regard. I'll stop there in terms of the readout from the State Department. Or maybe I'll close with this. Secretary Blinken said, we are working quite literally every single day through our Envoy for Assistance, Ambassador David Satterfield and his team, through the work that I and many others in the government are doing, engaging with different institutions of the UN, engaging with the Israeli government, the Egyptians, and the Jordanians. The bottom line is this, though. We need to get more aid in through more places to reach more people. That's the bottom line. We want to make sure that we deliver on that. And forgive me for, again, adding commentary, I would say the bottom line is we have to stop the massive number of deaths. We have to stop the violence. We have to call on Hamas to lay down their arms. We have to call on Israel to lay down their arms. A comprehensive ceasefire is the only solution. More aid for more bombing, more aid and a short-term pause and then a continued war is not going to solve the core issues. And so I fundamentally disagree that more aid is the answer. We do want immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance into Gaza after a comprehensive ceasefire and negotiated settlements. So we're calling for a release of the hostages in exchange for political prisoners, a comprehensive ceasefire. We're calling for immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance, and that the core causes of the conflict be addressed. I wanted to close by reading, I got a message from WhatsApp from one of my contacts in Gaza. He titled this, "Laugh Out Loud from Israel, Message Received." And he got a report on his home. He's in Khan Yunis, his home is in Gaza City. And he said, remnants of the Israeli army have left a haunting imprint within our home. Graffiti adorns the walls, bearing directions for evacuation, mostly geared towards soldiers, yet the marks extend beyond the drawings. They encompass the wreckage of our furniture, the demolition of the walls, the splintering of the doors and the gates, the dismantling of solar panels, the uprooting of every flower and ornamental plant. In the wake of such devastation, we find ourselves voiceless, unable to lament our losses, be they the homes that are reduced to rubble or the loved ones we mourn. What significance lies in our plight when compared to the grief of our neighbors who have lost kin and property? The irony is starkly evident in the location chosen for their marks on our walls that say LOL Israel. It's situated near a children's plastic swimming pool, a symbol of innocence and recreation that was once full of water used just weeks prior to the conflict. There was no hint of extremism within our home. There was no incitement to violence. Even the flowers once proudly displayed by the door were callously uprooted. Pondering the rationale behind the Army's actions yields no solace, nor does it offer answers to our myriad of questions. Who cares for our inquiries, our anguish? Witnessing Israeli soldiers brazenly parade items pillaged from Gazans' homes, we are met not with remorse, but with indifference. Examining the photos sent by a sympathetic friend, I note the absence of our cherished family albums, even in this aspect of our existence, like so many of Palestinian life, fades from the very realm of oral history. Every flower in our home was familiar to me, the hues, the fragrance, even the subtle signs of health or the need for vitamins. Each morning there was a ritual stroll, bidding good day to the blossoms. We poured our hearts into creating what we believed to be our dream abode, relishing the company of the visitors who graced our threshold. Forgive me for entwining you in this tragic narrative before extending an invitation to a home that now lies in ruins, unfinished and forsaken. But lest I leave you with that story, I thought I would close with a story of inspiration. I grew up about 40 miles southeast of the White House in Washington, D.C. I grew up in rural Southern Maryland, just off of Route 4 in Calvert County, Maryland. And as God would have ordained it, my childhood physician, actually the man in the hospital who literally handed me to my mother, is a Palestinian Christian. He's a physician, a Palestinian American, a devout Christian. He's now in his 80s. And he has a sister who lives in Jerusalem. He speaks with a strong Arabic accent. He loves Jesus. He loves Palestine. And he came to Washington, D.C. this week to join the Pilgrimage for Peace March when they arrived from their pilgrimage and their walk from Philly to the White House. He ended up getting into town after the vigil had already ended, and he told me that he held his own protest, and he was wearing a keffiyeh, and he was holding a cross that was as tall as he was. And the words on it say, "Save crucified Palestinians." And he had that in one hand and a Palestinian flag in the other. And I just was inspired by his witness, the witness of this 80-some-year-old Palestinian American, a doctor who has saved lives, who has been motivated and compelled by love, who wants the killing in Gaza to be brought to an end, and who desperately longs for Palestinians, for his people to be free. And my encouragement is, might we work alongside of those, all of those, Jews, Christians, and Muslims who hold to these same commitments, the commitment of safety and security for all, self-determination and liberation for Palestine and for Israel. It is not until both peoples are safe and free that all of us will be free.